Hello, and we are back on the Coaches Dugout Podcast, the podcast for coaches by coaches. I'm Shashi. I'm flying solo today, as you can already tell. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. We are everywhere, by the way, so please do click on the follow button. Now, I have got to tell you, we've got a very special 4-part series going on for the podcast, and it's a 4-part series on the LCS, the Lion City Sailors Football Club. Now, the Lion City Sailors Football Club are a professional club here in Singapore, if you don't already know, and I am, by the way, at their spanking new facility at Mattar Road, so do check the place out if you do have the time. Now, in the next few episodes, we are going to talk to a few key personnel, technical personnel at the club, and see how they help the coaches. This is a coaches podcast, by the way, so how they can actually help the coaches in their bid for success. So what better way to start than to speak to the sporting director of the LCS, Mr. Badri Ghent.
Hi Shashi, thanks for having me. Really a big fan of your work.
Wow, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking your time off and to be here. But before we start talking about your role as the sporting director at the club and so on, let's talk a little bit about your background a little bit,
Sure.
where you came from and how you became the sporting director of the club.
I mean, it's been a bit of an unconventional journey, if you want to call it that. I've always been involved in football and in sport. Grew up playing the game. Was never quite good enough to make it to the big leagues, obviously, but I'm just very grateful and thankful to still be involved and to contribute to the sport in Singapore. So I graduated from the University of Birmingham with a business management degree, and then I was with Sport Singapore for a couple of years. And in those formative years of the career, that really helped me a lot. I built lifelong relationships and bonds with people that I'm still very close to now. And truth be told, that has definitely helped to get to where I am today.
Right.
Yeah. So after Sport Singapore, I joined the Singapore Environment Council for a bit. Tried myself to delve outside of sport.
Right.
It was a very interesting journey for me with Jose over there, and I'm very thankful for his mentorship and his guidance. But it came upon a time where I felt that I needed to involve myself back in football and in sport. One fine day, I got a call from my good friend Azrul, who was then the general manager of Home United. He had just joined, and he was looking to form a team to really help Singapore football progress through Home United. And I joined as a marketing executive or BD executive, if you want to call it that, back in 2013. And it's been a really fruitful and very interesting journey for me.
Nice. And you talked about Home United, so obviously it's a pretty seamless transition as into the LCS, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
So that's that played quite a big part as well. Now let's get into the sporting director role, right? Now I think it's kind of common in Europe, and if you talk about the teams in Europe, to have a sporting director in their club sides and stuff like that. But I dare say in Singapore, I think it's like one out of how many teams, So you're a rarity here in Singapore. Tell us, what does a sporting director do in a professional club here in Singapore?
Yeah. So sure, as you may know, I was the general manager of Home United, and then when we transitioned to the Sailors, I was the general manager. Truth be told, I still hold that hat as a general manager, but the sporting director role is a very natural progress and I would say a unique transition for us in terms of the direction that we want to take as a club. So in the discussions that we've had with our counterparts in Europe, they were always asking, who's your sporting director? Who do we speak to when it comes to player negotiations? And unique to Singapore is actually the general manager.
Right.
So that's something that I know we took it upon ourselves to see. Okay, maybe it will be a right opportunity for us to rebrand this particular role. But you can call it whatever you want. But this is basically what the title suggests.
Right. Very interesting, right? And you talk about your role as the football or the sporting director at the club. How closely do you work with the head coach then?
The relationship must be second to none.
Right.
I work very closely with the head coach. I'm the go-between, between management, between the club staff, and obviously the technical team. But the relationship with the head coach must be the closest one. There are certain lines in the sand that has to be drawn in my particular role, whereby I don't get involved in player selection. I do provide solutions to problems that the head coach may or may not face. We work very closely to settle off-pitch problems. When it comes to, say, player availability or player injuries, player selection is something that I still don't get involved. But it's a very unique relationship with the head coach, and something where I would say that would be the testament to the club's success.
Listen, this relationship between you and the coach, I mean, judging from your role especially, right? It has to be really tight.
Yes.
Because you talk about the fine line and whatever, you don't want to be crossing over, and he don't want to be crossing over as well. And then that's where problems arise. I think that's key. And so far I mean, you guys have been doing a great job. Just one question regarding this role. How different is it if you compare it to a technical director's role? How different is that?
So, as the name suggests, for a technical director, it's more towards the tactical and technical approaches in terms of the club. In my particular role, I oversee the general direction and the general overview of the club. So, again, the roles are very clearly marked and very clearly defined. And I would say the bedrock to everything is obviously trust and communication, to ensure that everyone has his or her role and responsibility very clearly defined and very clearly scoped out, to prevent any unnecessary misunderstanding or even conflict.
How many sporting directors are there in Singapore?
I'm probably the first.
And only so far?
No, I think we had before the sporting director role, but again, given the context that we have here in Singapore, all clubs have a general manager, mainly to oversee the administrative aspects. So I still do that, but for my role at least, it is mainly more towards player recruitment, where we enter into negotiations with the clubs, with the agents, with the players. Then that role is very clearly defined.
This is a good point about the recruitment part. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. You spoke about there's only one so far, at least at the moment, the sporting director, because you kind of like overlap with the general manager role, right? What are the benefits of having just a specific football director at the club? What do you think in your opinion?
I mean, over here at the club, we focus a lot on specialization, right? I mean, everyone has his or her own strengths, and obviously qualities that they can bring to the table, to the club. I mean, for me, again, the sporting director role is an overview of sorts, overviewer of sorts, if you want to call it that. So again, we make it known that I'm not here to make a selection on the first 11 or the starting 11 or whatever it is. That's the head coach's role. But I would say my role is one of a problem solver one, if you want to call it that. But also at the same time working very closely with the head coach in terms of player identification, in terms of what happens to the team next season, and work very closely with management, and basically do our best to ensure that whatever the ambitions and the aims and the objectives of management is being delivered on the ground.
Right. It's I think you play a huge role, as well as the things that you do daily, and obviously every day is going to be different. Every day is going to be a different day. Now take for example tomorrow, you've got something big going on, right? Okay, just take for example tomorrow, a typical day for Badri.
I think the beauty about my role is, in the 10 years that I've been in this so far, no 2 days are the same, or will ever be the same. And for me, that is something that I'm very lucky to have. A typical day, I mean, I try to be at training as much as I can, based on my schedule and my meeting permits. So if there's training, we report about 6:30, 7 a.m. Get in touch with the players, with the staff, make sure everything's okay. Training continues. That's for me the easiest part of the job. That's where the head coach does his thing. And then after training, again, more conversations and discussions with players, with staff, making sure everything is being organized. We have no outstanding issues. And then try to squeeze in lunch. Usually doesn't happen. You can ask my colleagues. They're always complaining that I don't join them for lunch, which is completely fine for me. But then it goes on with meetings, and then the day probably ends at about 7-8 p.m.
Right. Busy Badri, right? Now, I think you touched on something that is very important as well, and especially you're talking about the coach and his role and stuff like that. We're talking about player recruitment. Okay. Now, how does it happen here? Now, because obviously, you have the head coach who wants a certain kind of player. For example, a DM, for example, defensive mid, right? So how does this work then? From that point, does he then speak to you? And then what's the process like?
I mean, there is no fixed process, if you want to call it that. Some coaches, they have a particular player that they've really identified. Some coaches, they said, okay, we have a problem area in the team, or there is an area that we think we can improve in. So the head coach will tell me, okay, say for Maxime Lestien's case, for example, the coach was looking out for a left-sided winger, left-footed ideally, with very strong crossing and assist statistics. Goal scoring is a bonus, but obviously we have someone like Chinook who will be on the receiving end of the crosses. Once we get the full set of requirements and specific requirements from the coach, say in terms of age, height, even weight, we then zoom in and we go into the market where we reach out to our network of agents and intermediaries and contacts. We use a lot of data as much as we can. So we use things like Huddle, Y-Scout, Instat. I'm very lucky to have a strong analysis team. So I work together with the analyst to see what options there are out there in the market. So the players have to make sense from an economic and from a technical perspective as well. I mean, obviously we can't be busting the bank and going big. It has to be sustainable and ideally a player that is coming to Singapore with good intentions and good reason. So I mean, based on the players that we're looking at, say mid to late 20s, the trick is always to try to find a player who has a young family, and trying to leverage on working and living in Singapore as much as we can. So I mean, in Singapore we have world-class infrastructure. A player may not necessarily want to come to the Singapore Premier League if they're at the height of their powers, but we try to convince them with the ambition of the club, with the facility that we have here today in Mattar, and obviously working and living in Singapore and the benefits and the privileges that come with that. So once that happens, once we identify a player, our analysts will go 5 years back from a historical data perspective. So we trawl through all the information as we can, and we look out for potential red flags, maybe disciplinary issues, injury issues, off the pitch issues as well. And once all the boxes are ticked, then we go into the negotiations with the players and his club.
Right. Is there any particular place that you would look into, like narrowing? Maybe I don't know, Europe, maybe Holland, for example. Is there a specific area, or you just say this is the player that we need, and then judging by the stats and whatever, you cast the net wider than that?
Sure. I mean, again, it really goes back to what the coach requires. Say, for example, he needs a big, tall, strong centre back. Then we look at potentially the Eastern European market, for example. If he wants a bit more of a technical player, fast, speedy, then obviously we look at Western Europe. But if he wants a pure, skilled playmaker, then there's nowhere else than to go into the South American region. So, we don't have a specific criteria per se, but we look at all the different markets and see what are options that are, I would say, reasonably available to us.
It's interesting the way you kind of like selling. The selling point, for the player, and you spoke about Singapore as a safe nation and what have you. Is that one of the biggest selling points for players? I mean, from your experience, like a player, you speak to a player and the player says, the league's not so strong, blah blah blah, and then you say, Singapore is safe, brilliant for your family, everything's nearby, whatever, right? Is that one of the biggest selling points based on your experience so far?
I mean, we have to sell whatever we can, right? Obviously, we want a player of a certain standard and of a certain caliber, and like I said, his ambitions may be somewhere else. If he wants to come to Asia, obviously he'll be looking at, say, Japan or Korea or whatever it is. But I mean, for us, like for this year, we participated in the Asian Champions League, and there was a big pool as well in terms of bringing players like Chinook, Pedro, and Maxime. So obviously the ambitions of the player in the club have to be aligned. We also have to ensure that the player is not coming here for the not so right reasons. In terms of coming to Singapore and just having a good, comfortable life. They're here to work as well.
We've seen lots of that.
So we have to ensure that his intentions and his ambitions are aligned with us as a club. But I mean, going back to Singapore, I mean that's why we look at players with young families. Say for example, Maxim, he had multiple offers, big money offers from say Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, but he knew that they would be at the expense of his family's comfort and to a certain extent quality of life. So we had to present the options in Singapore. We showed potential schools that he could enroll his kids in. Obviously, our LCS Academy is doing a fantastic job. His kids can be enrolled into our academy, which they already are. Look at housing, as much information as
it's a huge the whole package, isn't it? It's not only the football, it comes with everything, and it's great. And just speaking, you touched on agents as well just now. How does this work with the club? Do you approach an agent, for example, for a player, and then you get introduced and stuff like that? The payment is based on you and the agent, or the agent and the player? How does this work? Generally.
There's no hard and fast rule. Right. Obviously, it all boils down to negotiations, and as much as we can, we try to squeeze as much as we can from the agents, from the clubs. I mean, again, it's in the club's interest. I mean, that's no secret. So the agents are there to help facilitate negotiations and discussions. Obviously, we can't get in touch with the player directly if he's under contract, and the agents who are generally based overseas, they would already have the right network and contacts. They would already have an into the club that we want to speak to for this particular player. So it's basically a facilitator of sorts.
Nice. Just talking about the recruitment process and all, and it's smart of you to actually mention Maxim Lestian, because we talk about recruitment gone wrong. That isn't it. That is recruitment gone right. Absolutely brilliant, and I've been doing commentary and stuff. Okay, right now I don't know in terms of stats how many assists already.
Probably 20 now.
With
11 goals, I think, but who's counting?
So one of in the running for Player of the Year as well. So kudos to you guys, right? The recruitment side of things, brilliant. We move on a little bit. I spoke about this at the beginning, the Mattar Road facility. What went into the planning? It's brilliant. It's excellent, and I said this to a couple of people as well. Just casually, from the time that you guys actually said that, okay, this Mattar Road is going to be a facility, blah blah blah, and it's just, I think within a year or so, or something like that, it came up, and to me, it's special because it's not all talk. It's you talk and then you go and do it, right? So what went into the planning? Because this is brilliant.
I mean, for me on a personal level, it was a natural follow through from Home United. I mean, this plot of land was where the Home United Youth Football Academy was situated, Haifa for short. Known for the good and maybe not so good, the not so good stuff as well. But it really gave us the right impetus and the right foundation to build this amazing facility. What we have today, it's really a physical manifestation of all our hopes and ambitions and dreams. And I'm very lucky to be working with my colleagues who, we really dug deep and banded together to really deliver this amazing place. We were very lucky, very fortuitous if you ask me, because when the planning started, that was when COVID happened. So with the circuit breaker and everything, there wasn't any football games, so that really gave us the time and the bandwidth to really focus on what's needed. And we just researched as much as we could. Travel was fairly limited, but we obviously had the skeleton. We had the plot of land there, and it was just a matter of how much can we optimize and how much can we stretch, in terms of the functionality and the usability of this space. And we had to bear in mind that this is a facility for everyone, not just for the first team obviously, but for the academy, and we are probably upwards of 900 to 1,000 kids now. So it's really a place where we really had to dig deep and just maximize and optimize the functional space available.
Brilliant. And it's funny how you talked about the academy. I think LCS they probably you guys have embarked on arguably the biggest youth development projects ever seen right now. How important is this project, the academy side and the school the school side as well, in its long-term plan?
It's extremely important if you ask me. I mean, it's going to be the cornerstone of future successes of the club. As a club, we determined that we needed to be self-sustainable, in terms of the follow-through of players from the academy into the first team. And it's not just for LCS. What we are building here, what we are developing here is for Singapore football. I mean, our hopes and our ambitions is to help and develop players for the Singapore national team, whether they play for LCS or overseas clubs. If such opportunity arises, that'll be fantastic for us. But it's not a case of these players being developed through the LCS academy is only for the LCS first team. I mean, we do want to be so small-minded. We want to expand the horizons a bit. So if our players can get out there, experience real-world overseas experience, why not?
You talk about overseas and stuff. The players at whatever 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-olds, they're already going overseas for tournaments and stuff like that. So that's great. Do you guys probably in 5 years' time, maybe now it's a little bit too early, thinking about self-sustaining in terms of local players taking the step up and then playing in the first team? Because instead of just going out there and buying players, because now you've got a proper setup, and then is that really a long-term thing looking at the first team?
I mean, where we are today with the first team at least, we needed to establish our proof of concept. We needed to be successful almost immediately. But I mean, obviously, it really is going to help the club if we have our own channel of players coming through from the academy into the first team. And like I said, it's all about self-sustainability as well. And with the academy coaches that we have, who to me are world class, with the direction that the academy is taking, I think something where it's going to be a very natural transition into the first team.
I want to ask you I don't know, it could be a difficult question, right? In terms of the talent that you guys have in the first team, right? Do you think it's going to be very difficult for these kids to break into the... I mean, just take a look at this year, for example. Right? You've got all the local players and the foreigners, and do you think it's going to be a tough ask for these guys to actually break into and even smell the bench? It's going to be difficult, isn't it?
I mean, we're not here to paint a rosy picture to the players. I mean, it is going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy, but it all boils down to them, in terms of how much and how badly they want it. Obviously, we have very good players in the first team currently. A lot of experienced heads and a lot of, I would say, match winners in their own right. So it's up to the young players to show and prove themselves where it matters most, which is in the training ground.
I totally agree with you on that point, because it is a dog world kind of thing where you got to prove it yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. You got to go in there, you got to, whatever, whether you're young or old, you still got to go out there and push. So, for the kids who are, trying to make it into the team, there's only one thing that you can do. You just work hard and, impress the coaches, and that's the only way you can break into the team, right? Now, any particular talents that you think maybe in the next 2 or 3 years we don't want to name names, right?
Sure.
Because I think it's unfair for these kids. But anyone that you see, maybe 2 or 3 players that you think, hey, this guy is special.
I mean, we are in Mattar every day, and we get to see some of the academy and the youth teams in training, even in our under 21 team as well.
Right.
So we do have, I would say, some really exciting talent coming through the system, and let's hope that they continue working hard, and sometimes with a little bit of luck, maybe with no injuries and stuff like that, they can one day not just play for LCS, but hopefully the Singapore national team as well.
I'm here like Tuesdays and Thursdays and watching the trainings as well, and you do see certain players. But again, I don't know. I get it with young boys when they're that age and they're so special. We tend to like overplay it a little bit too much, and then they go and fall by the wayside, and we don't want to be doing that as well. So good luck to the young talents out there. I think it's very important that they follow the proper progression and stuff like that. Something bad about your job that you don't like? We go free and easy now.
Something bad? Wow. I mean, the reality is that it doesn't feel like a job to me. I mean, football for me has always been my passion since the day I could walk. So it's more than a job. I know I'm stealing that slogan from the Singapore Police Force,
which is
more than just a job or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, I'm lucky because I also married a wife who is very understanding.
Very important, right?
Yes, and also loves football.
Right.
So obviously with the job comes very I would say uncertain hours. Whether it's a Monday or Sunday, it's just a day. There's no Monday to Friday 9 to 5.
Right.
Even if it's 7 a.m. in the morning or 11 p.m. at night, it doesn't really matter. Things still needs to get done.
Right.
So I mean, for me, I don't think there's anything that I don't like about it.
Something that has been the most satisfying for you so far, at least for LCS, not the Home United side, the LCS side. Something that has really, you think that, wow, this is the most satisfying that I've done.
I think it's an element of growth, and I mean, if you take me back 2 years or 3 years to when we were Home United in my role then to where we are today, I'll be like, nah, I mean, it's not possible, right? But what for me I've seen is, you know, the growth that we've had, not just as a club, but, you know, amongst my fellow colleagues as well. We are really breaking through boundaries almost every single day. We're breaking through certain barriers that people think were not possible before, and it's just a matter of, you know, the willpower and obviously the determination to get things done. But yeah, for me the most satisfying aspect is the growth and obviously the people management. I think in my role, sometimes football takes a backseat. You know, it's more about managing people, managing the expectations, managing the staff, the players. So it's a daily balancing act. And I think the most important thing I've learned in this job for sure is that obviously we can't make everyone happy, but you know, it's all about constant communication and dialogue really.
Do you think the clubs in Singapore should adopt this direction? Not in terms of the money, it's a difficult one. Okay, let's forget about the investment. I'm talking about a sporting director, really, you know, a separate thing to the general manager and doing that. You know, I think we can all learn from what you've been doing, or what you can do, and what, you know, and it has shown, you know, in terms of the results and stuff like that. Do you think the clubs here in Singapore should have that?
I mean, to each his own, right? It really depends, because like even the sporting director role is not something that was very common in the past, right? We've had instances of, you know, the UK model where it was your Arsene Wenger's and your Alex Ferguson's who's literally running everything. You have some aspects where it is a club president running everything. So it's very hard to make it a template for everyone to adopt. So it really is relative to the individual club's requirements and ambitions, if you want to call it that.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you see LCS in 5 years' time? Let's put it in 5 years' time.
Sure. I mean, obviously we want to be a football powerhouse, not just for the first team, but for the academy as well. I mean, my personal ambition is to make it through the knockout rounds of the Asian Champions League. For me, that is where the proof of concept really lies. You know, we had our first Champions League outing earlier this year in Buriram in April. We walked away with 7 points, and the biggest, I wouldn't say regret, but you know, looking back, we were in with a shout for qualifying into the second round up until the last 20-30 minutes of the final game. So for me, that was something that you know, we can all look back with a sense of achievement. But it's important that, you know, we don't rest on our laurels just yet. You know, we use that as something where it's going to be a building block for us. We've tasted the Champions League experience. We liked how it tastes, and we want to go for more.
It's the hunger, isn't it? You don't want to be stopping there. You know,
exactly.
Like you mentioned names like Wenger and Ferguson. It's the staying power which is the most ridiculous thing. How can they ever stay that long, right?
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. Last question before we go. 4 games to go. Champions?
I hope
so. Come on, stick your neck out.
I mean, 4 games, 4 finals. We do have the talent at our disposal, and for me, I believe we can do the job. You know, it's not going to be easy with 4 games left to go. Anything can happen. So I hope we will win it. Yes or no? Come on, you're sitting on the fence. Has to be a yes.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Badri, thank you so much for being on the very first episode of the LCS special. I think it has been really good, informational as well, especially for coaches and clubs and whoever's watching this. What is the actual role of the football director? What does he do and things like that? And it has been eye-opening as well. So again, thank you so much and good luck for the season ahead, and of course for the next few years as well. I think it's a big project, it's a brilliant project, so good luck with that.
Thank you so much, Asi.
This has been the Coaches Dugout Podcast, the very first episode of the LCS special. We'll see you soon with episode number 2. Cheers.